Hey everyone! Now let's discuss some atomic chemistry. And atomic chemistry is one of the topics that needs a lot of memorization and also a lot of imagination. So in this video, we're gonna try together to imagine things, and hopefully by the end of the video, you will have this picture in your brain and you will be capable of solving questions regarding atoms and subatoms. Now, let's get to it. So, what is an atom? An atom is the smallest subparticle that exists in everything on Earth. Your hand has atoms, your clothes have atoms, everything around us is made up of atoms. Now, those atoms, inside them, there exist some certain things. Well, let's see. Inside the atoms there is something called a nucleus, and the nucleus is the center of the atom. So on the diagram, this is the nucleus. So this is the nucleus. And if everything in the atom revolves around this center. Now the next thing we're gonna discuss is something called an electron. An electron is the subparticle inside the atom that has a negative charge. Now, also the atom has something called neutrons. And neutrons are also subparticles of a charge 0. Now, lastly, we're going to talk about protons. And protons have a positive charge. Particles, they are subparticles also that have a positive charge. Now let's label these on the diagram. Well, these tiny outer particles are the electrons. So these are the electrons. And here, beside the nucleus, are the protons. So these are the protons, and the neutrons would be somewhere here. So this would be the neutron. So all of these subparticles are floating inside the atom and revolving around the center, which is the nucleus. Now let's discuss those in more details. Now here is a table. We have the element, the mass of that element, and finally the charge. Now, first let's look at protons. Now, the mass of the proton is 1.67 times 10 to the negative 27 kilograms. See how tiny that is? And the charge of the proton, as we mentioned, is a positive charge. Now let's move on to the neutrons. And the neutrons have the same mass as the protons, but with a 0 charge. They're neutral, they don't have a charge. Now finally, let's talk about electrons. And electrons have a mass of 9.1 times 10 to the negative 31 kilogram. And as we mentioned, they have a negative charge. Now, how do we apply this to chemistry, and how do we apply this to elements in the periodic table? Now, let's discuss this. Well, as an example, let's pick any random element. For example, sodium. Now, sodium is number 11 in the periodic table, and there's a number under it. We don't know what that number is. It's 22.9. If you have no clue, this is the first time you watch this, okay, now we don't know. We don't have a clue. Well, the number 11 is the atomic number of sodium, and the 22.9 is the atomic mass of sodium. Now, what does that mean? And how can we relate this to electrons, protons, and all that science fiction stuff? Now, The atomic number is basically the number of protons, and the atomic mass is also the number of protons plus the number of neutrons, which is also known as the number of nucleons. Let me write that. The number of nucleons. So, let's go over this one more time. We picked a random element from the periodic table, and that was sodium. And we said that sodium is number 11 in the periodic table and has a mass of 22.9. And we said that also number 11 means that it's the atomic number, and the atomic number is the number of protons in sodium. Or in other words, the number of positively charged particles. Now, we also mentioned that the 22.9 is the atomic mass, and the atomic mass is basically the number of protons plus the neutrons, and this is also known as the number of nucleons. Now, one thing also to note about this, since sodium is neutral in its natural state, it doesn't have any charge, therefore it has 11 electrons also. So that means it has 11 charged particles, and so it has a negative 11 and a positive 11 protons. That's why it has a 0 charge in its normal state, in its natural state. It doesn't have a positive or a negative charge. So let's recap. We said in this video we're going to talk about atomic chemistry and the atom, which is the smallest thing that exists on Earth, and we talked about the different elements that are in the atom, which were the protons, the neutrons, and the electrons. And we said here how to apply this to the periodic table and the elements of the periodic table. And we picked a random element, which was sodium, and we discussed that sodium has an atomic number 11, which means the number of protons, and also it has an atomic mass of 22.9, which is the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. Now that's that for this video. In the next video, we're gonna solve an example together on neutrons, electrons, and protons, so stay tuned and good luck.